on this episode of Jeff Does Vegas.
It was the first album I ever bought too. My brothers belonged to one of those CD clubs. Remember those? My brothers were like taking pity on me because I was the baby and I wanted a CD too. And so they're like, okay, fine, you can pick one. And I was trying to be cool. So I picked Bat Out of Hell because the cover was scary. And I thought, okay, they're going to think I'm cool because I'm picking this really scary one. It came and same thing. I was just enthralled by the album art. And then I remember putting it in and Bat Out of Hell started playing. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome.
Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff, and this is Jeff Does Vegas. Hey there, and welcome to episode number 133 of Jeff Does Vegas. Before we jump into this episode of the podcast, I want to thank my guest from the last episode, Jeff Schumacher, Vice President of Exhibits and Programs at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. Jeff joined me once again to help separate fantasy from reality, this time as it relates to the story of mobster Benjamin Siegel and the 1991 film Bugsy, starring Warren Beatty and Annette Bening. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, jump into the archives at jeffdoesvegas.com or search out episode number 132, Bugsy, Fact versus Fiction. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, here we go. On to the show. October 21st, 1977 saw the release of what would eventually become one of the best-selling albums of all time, Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell. The concept for the album came from a musical that writer and composer Jim Steinman had conceived back in 1974. Meatloaf and Steinman spent the better part of 1975 rewriting and recording tracks for the album, then close to 2 years auditioning the record and getting rejected by every single record company they presented it to. In mid-1977, the album was picked up and released by Epic record subsidiary Cleveland Records, but it didn't really get much traction until a concert video of the song Bat Out of Hell aired on BBC television. Then it all blew up. Bat Out of Hell went on to sell over 43 million copies worldwide, and it's still selling like crazy today. It's certified 14 times platinum in the United States, it's the best-selling album of all time in Australia, and it spent a total of 530 weeks on the UK album charts. Flash forward about 20 years. In the late 1990s, word of a new musical based on Bat Out of Hell began to surface. In 2008, the show was officially announced and began workshopping in New York City in 2015. It finally hit the stage in the UK in Manchester in 2017 before moving to London's famed West End. After opening in Toronto and taking the show on the road across North America and around the world, it was revealed in early 2022 that the theater in the Paris Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas would be home to a new resident production of Bat Out of Hell, the musical. Joining me for this episode of the podcast is veteran Vegas performer Ann Martinez, who plays the part of Sloane in Bat Out of Hell. Ann and I chatted about what initially brought her to Las Vegas a decade ago and some of her past shows and performances. We talked about her love for the music of Meatloaf and Jim Steinman, what makes Bat Out of Hell such a special show to be a part of, and much more. Please enjoy my conversation with Ann Martinez.
I'm originally from Rochester, New York. I made the move in the summer of 2012. My husband got hired with Cirque du Soleil's production of O as a technician and scuba diver. And I have my best friend from college. He actually lives out here, and his little girl is my godchild. So he had been kind of slowly brainwashing me to move out here. And so I was doing little projects here on breaks from other gigs. And then when my husband got hired with Cirque, it just kind of finally all came together.
And so was performing something that you always wanted to do? I know so many performers and so many people that I've chatted with in the past have said, yep, like pretty much right out of the womb, I was singing, dancing, acting, performing for family. Was that pretty much the case for yourself?
Yeah, my parents put me in dance class when I was 2 years old. So I started really young, and then I was working as a professional ballerina when I was 8. So I started pretty young, but my parents are really supportive of the arts. And so we were always going to productions and symphonies and just seeing all different types of stuff. And then when I was 11 years old, and I played Suzuki violin when I was 3, I started playing violin. So I was always doing music. And then when I was 11, I auditioned for the musical Annie, because when your name is Annie, you get many, many gifts from the musical. And so the pressure was on. And I had never sung by myself before, but I ended up booking the job as an orphan and understudying the lead. So my first musical theater experience was very professional, and I really loved it. And that's when I was like, yeah, let's do this forever.
And so I assume you did formal education for the arts as well.
Yes, I went to a few different prestigious kind of like program schools, the Eastman School of Music, and then I did some separate company work as a kid, and then I got my BFA in acting at SUNY Fredonia in New York, and then I went on and did my master's at the Central School of Speech or Drama and RADA in London, UK. So I went right away into my grad work because it is also shorter in the UK. It's accelerated, so I would not suggest that for anyone unless they want their brain to explode. But I did that right away. Did some West End, came home and wrote my thesis and interned at an Equity Theater, and then hit New York.
Something I always like to ask the performers that I interview on the podcast is, if you hadn't gone in this direction and gone into working in entertainment, what would you be doing? What do you think you'd be doing? Was there something else that you had in mind?
Oh, I definitely would have been a lawyer for sure. I have a minor in law. I just find it very interesting, but I would have loved to do go hardcore into like FBI, criminal studies. I think as an actor, we're always really interested in human beings and how we think and why we do what we do. It helps us understand how to play different characters. So I've always found psychology very interesting, but I cannot solve anyone's problem. So it would definitely be on more of the law side of things for me personally. But yeah.
I always like to find out about the first Vegas gig. So many performers that I've talked to have, when they've moved to Vegas, they've really had to slug it out. They've had to hustle. They've had to do the dancing dealer, the dancing bartender type gig, things like that. What about yourself? Did you jump right into working, or did you have to kind of go the back road?
I was really lucky. I booked a show my first day I got here. I flew in from New York, and I was reading, at the time we had a website that posted all the auditions in Vegas, and it just said 80s rock show. And I was like, oh, cool. So I go over to the Stratosphere, and I just made it. Like, all my stuff was in the car, and I just ran in from flying, and I sang for a show called Fight, which was a vampire 80s rock show where the dancers were topless. But I didn't know that. I just thought it was this rock show. And then the poster was a girl with vampire fangs, but she was playing the guitar. And I was like, oh, cute. Maybe it's like a Halloween thing, because it was like late summer. And then they hired me on the spot. And then they asked me to stay that evening and watch the show. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I was a little overwhelmed and surprised. I'd never seen a topless show before, ever. So I was like, oh my gosh. And, it was a really cool show. It was really intense. And probably one of the sweetest casts I've ever worked with, and talented. And it was really cool. So I was lucky. At literally the day I got here, I booked a show, and then I just kind of kept booking shows from there on in. So it was a really cool experience.
I remember Bite. Bite was a show that unfortunately I never actually got to see, but it was always one of those shows that was on my list. And I have honestly, I had no idea that it was a topless show. I would have been just as surprised as you going to the show.
Oh yeah. I mean, I thought it was like everyone's just me dancing to rock music, and all of a sudden everyone comes out and they're like, ah, with their fangs and then ripping their shirts off. I was like, oh my God, do I have to do this? Like it was just so different. But it kind of showed me what's really cool about Vegas is that there's so many different types of entertainment, and it was a huge education for me, and why it's so important for things in Vegas to be exclusive, because that's what makes Vegas special, and that's what keeps business working. And it was cool to have that experience right away.
You've worked in a ton of Vegas shows too. Like you're one of those people that it seems like you never stop.
No.
I mean, I've seen you at Monday's Dark a bunch of times. I've seen your band Red Penny Arcade perform a few times. You've done Zombie Burlesque. You've worked with Zoe Bowie. You've been a part of the cast of Fantasy. But one of my favorite performances, favorite shows that I've seen you in was Baz at the Venetian. Such a great show. And I was so sad when that show closed.
Yeah, me too. That was an extremely difficult show, and it was a intense experience for me because I came in originally with a contract just to play Daisy for about a month. They had like a break in between another gal coming in, and so they needed someone to cover the role. And then after the month, they asked me to stay as a full-time understudy for the lead. And I was like, yeah, sure, thinking I would be, sitting in the music booth, knitting, getting paid to hit some high notes in the mic for, choral sections. And then by January, I was playing Satine full time for about a year, almost 2 years. So it was really cool because it wasn't even a role that I was looked at for. And I had jumped into it right away. And the president of the hotel was extremely supportive with me playing the role. So it was a really cool. It was the first time I had done something that was very close to an actual quote unquote musical in Vegas, as opposed to our kind of different types of entertainment, which is more like presentational theater. So it was cool to kind of jump into playing a character again.
Baz was such a unique show in the way it was presented and the storyline and the characters. And looking back on it, I sometimes wonder if maybe the Vegas audience just didn't get it, if that makes sense. Do you think a show like Baz maybe would have lasted longer if it wasn't in Las Vegas?
I don't know. I think in any show, especially nowadays, so much has to go into the marketing, because when people come, if they don't see it, if they don't know what it is immediately, they're not going to come. And I think that's a mistake we all make in the world today, is adjusting our marketing for an audience. I would say, like, market your project, your show, whatever, as though the person looking at it does not speak English at all and has no idea what you're talking about. So it should be something that's very easy to pronounce, bright colors that are attractive to the eye, and have some kind of movement and some kind of a reel that lets me know what it is in 30 seconds, which is very difficult because there is so much to do in town. But yeah, I think the show was great. I think it was very beautiful. But for me, it's all about if someone doesn't know what it is, they're not going to purchase. So, but when we did have people come, they really loved it. So that's all I can do as a performer is, kind of release that to the people who are in charge of that, and then hope that it connects with the audience. The only thing I can do is tell the story. And that's, and that was very important to all of us in the cast every night. And so when people did come to the show, they really enjoyed it. They enjoyed what they saw. And we could be ambiguous on certain things and specific in others. So, yeah, I think it's just kind of, you have to have that full combo, the most amazing show could have incredible reviews, but if people don't know how to get there or what it is right away, you risk, people not coming. But it just happens. And sometimes hotels, they closed us because they were going to have a exhibition coming in. And so we closed, and then the exhibition never came. The theater's been empty since. So you never know what's going on business-wise with the hotels. And I respect that. It's not really my lane. So you have to always kind of remember the hotel, especially when they're invested in something. It's up to them what they would like to do with the property.
I want to talk about when you first moved to Las Vegas. Was there anything that really surprised you about the city? I know other people that I've spoken to, and even myself, now that I've been spending more time in the city and getting away from the tourist areas and away from the Strip, I'm always kind of surprised about how sprawled out and normal the city is. And I think for a lot of people, it really isn't what they're expecting. Was that kind of the same deal for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, when you leave the Strip area, it's like a small town. They know us at the grocery store, they know us at the bank, So I think it kind of surprised me at how lovely it is to live here, and that, you can own a home and have children and own your cars and have a house and still work in your field. Whereas, like in New York, it's so expensive for a tiny little place, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life paying rent. And my parents were very supportive, but my dad especially always said, you are not to wait tables. That's not why you've worked so hard, because you're here to work and make money. This is a business. And so, in New York, it was kind of like, well, you have to wait tables for a year and pay your dues before, you'll even be seen by certain people. And I was like, I don't need that check mark on my resume of doing Broadway. I would much rather, I did West End and had that thrill. I was like, I'm here to make money and make a living. And I want to be able to settle down somewhere and still work. And I think that's what is so great about Vegas, is that people in this business can live here and work here. And it's quite sweet. It's just, when you go to the Strip, you just get ready for Crazy Pants McGee coming at you at all places. So it's very entertaining. There's always something to see. But I love that, when you're off Strip, there's a dog park, and, there are, if you're religious, there are tons of churches and other places you can go to worship, and there's, groups you can talk to, and people here are very nice. And, it's kind of like a quirky little world. That was a surprise for me, definitely. And I'm always surprised by the insanity that I see weekly. And that's always entertaining. I was driving on the 15 when I first moved here, and there was heavy traffic. So, we're kind of stuck. And I looked to my right, and a guy dressed as Elvis pulled up next to me in a motorized wheelchair. And he had a huge boa constrictor, a real one, alive, around his neck. And he just was like, right past me. And I was like, this is where I live. So that was probably that, like, okay moment for me. Yeah.
The other thing that a lot of people I've talked to that have made the move from New York or Los Angeles to Las Vegas in the entertainment world is how much more of a community feeling it is, where it seems like everybody is willing to help each other out as opposed to stab each other in the back.
Yeah, I mean, New York and LA are very competitive, and I've always thought that's such a bad choice, in my opinion, only because there's no way you can ever win. There's always something that you're not going to get, and this business is tough because we have to be so vulnerable to do what we do, and so our heart's already on our sleeves. So if you don't get something, it already hurts. So to add competition with somebody that you have no control over is, in my opinion, a bad idea. And I've watched a lot of people suffer mentally from that. So I always kind of steer clear of that and people who are like that. And there are some people in Vegas who are like that, and are just, unfortunately, but the vast majority are people, we just want to work and do our jobs, and we know who we are and what we do. And so if something doesn't work out, it's on us and you just kind of move on. And yeah, me personally, I'm all about helping people out. Like, when you move to a new place, you don't know anybody. And here it's a lot of networking. I always tell them, like, ghosting here, talk to this person. If you need help, let me know. Here's some sheet music. Oh, I'm auditioning for this. I'm like, oh, they're going to make you sing this song. Make sure you know this. Just because, we're all in the same boat. So we all just want to work. So it's been cool to be in a town that's the vast majority is that mentality to be kind and supportive. And I genuinely enjoy watching other women, succeed. It's really cool because we all know how difficult this business is anyway. So when I see somebody who I know works so hard, it makes me really happy because I know the work she put in and how much it means to her to be in that moment. So it's a nice thing to see.
My understanding is that the people who are not nice people don't last very long in Las Vegas.
No, they do not. It was when I moved out here, it was really tough. I had quite a group, really, really not very nice to me. And it was, at the time, it was really, really hurtful because I just didn't understand. But they all just kind of disappeared later because, there people like that in any profession. When you're spending so much time on foolishness, you spend less time on your own work, your own craft, your own dreams, your own family. It's a distraction. And it's just like a spiral down of just being unhappy. Nothing's ever enough. And so, yeah, it just doesn't work. But there's a lot of people in this town who have been so incredibly kind and helpful to me personally. And they are always working. They're always thriving. They're always lovely. No matter ups or downs, they just keep on working. And I'm like, well, they work because they're lovely to work with. I've met a lot of people who in my career who are extremely talented, way better singer than me, way more beautiful, way more talented. I'm like a little troll next to them. But I've booked gigs because I was on time. And I was polite to the pianist. And I knew my material. It's like little things like that really separate the people who continue to work and the people who just kind of fall out from it all. It's just all about, I think that's like that in every business though. The kinder you are and the easier you are to work with is the most important thing. And everything else you bring is just a plus.
Well, those people are gone. They have left Las Vegas. They are no longer a part of the world that we are speaking of today. You, however, are still there, and you are now on the Vegas Strip headlining a brand new show, Bat Out of Hell, the musical at the Paris Theater. I am so excited for this show.
Hey.
And I'm going to go off on my own little bit of a tangent here for just a second, if that's okay.
Please do.
Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell is an album that is very special to me for a variety of reasons. My dad was a huge music fanatic, and he had a massive album collection, which when he passed away back in 2020, I inherited. And one of those albums was Bat Out of Hell. It's an album that I used to listen to constantly to the point where I drove everybody nuts listening to Bat Out of Hell. And I mean, I was a kid. I was 5, 6, maybe 7 years old when I started listening to it. And I mean, the album artwork on that album cover was just incredible. And I would just spend hours staring at that album cover and dissecting it and looking for new details and finding something new every time I would look at it. So to have this music brought to life in the form of a musical and a show and presented in such a unique way is so cool to me and so amazing to me. And I'm so happy to see it come to life in this way.
Well, Jim Steinman, when he was writing it, he was in college, and he had this dream of writing this kind of Peter Pan-esque musical. And that's the first album. So he actually wanted it to be a musical, and he couldn't find just the backing for it. And in frustration, he was like, oh my God, let's just record it like an album, just so I can have a recording. And so it really was intended to be a musical, the first album. And then quite accidentally, the album blew up because like everyone just was going crazy about it. So everything Jim wrote, all of his music and that Meatloaf was singing, it was always intended to be a theatrical for a play. And so when I got this job and the producers told me that, I was like, oh my God. And I just went home and I, got a glass of wine, turned the lights out, and just was like, I'm gonna listen to this whole album front to back, knowing that it was meant to be a musical. And it was a totally different experience. I kind of understood, like, they have those like pauses, and then they're like, sometimes there's like talking before something. And I was like, oh my God, that's what he meant this whole time. It's like the music took on a whole new meaning. And all of his stuff, knowing that with his entire canon, really kind of added a different kind of a weight to already brilliant music. It was the first album I ever bought too. My brothers belonged to one of those CD clubs. Remember those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I still owe Columbia House money, actually.
I think we all do. We all owe them like $5.99. But my brothers were like taking pity on me because I was the baby and I wanted a CD too. And so they're like, okay, fine, you can pick one. And I was trying to be cool. So I picked Bat Out of Hell because the cover was scary. And I thought, okay, they're going to think I'm cool because I'm picking this really scary one. And it came, and same thing. I was just enthralled by the album art. And then I remember, putting it in and Bat Out of Hell started playing. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome. And so I've always loved that music. So it was really cool. When I got that call to come and audition for this, I started kind of devouring all the information I could find about the musical and how it came to be.
Let's talk about the musical, obviously, because it does have a plot. It's got a storyline. What is the story of Bat Out of Hell?
So the Cliff Notes version is it's this post-apocalyptic city, and there's this kind of motorcycle punk gang, and they're all 18 forever, kind of like the Lost Boys in Peter Pan-ish. And they've got all these different characters that are in the group, and they all kind of have their little statuses. And their leader is named Strat, and he's like their crazy fearless leader. And in this city, and they're always just causing chaos. They're spray painting stuff, blowing things up, just being a pain in the butt. And there's this huge tower in the middle of the city, and that's where my character Sloan lives. And I live there with my husband Falco, that's played by Travis Clower. And then we have our daughter named Raven, and that's played by Alize Cruz, and she is turning 18. And the conflict between the parents is the father wants her to stay inside forever. We keep her locked up in this tower, kind of like Rapunzel. And I secretly want her to go out and have some fun. So she ends up falling in love with the head of this gang, Strat, and chaos ensues. So there's these two love stories, the love story between the two young people, and then there's this love story between the parents who had their daughter very young. They were 16. And so they're young parents and very flawed, and they're living in this wild world. Everything's just continual chaos and lots of weather. And it kind of is what happens as the story goes along, and both of them, the challenges both of the couples face, and if they decide to continue together, all surrounded by music and mayhem and magic and Jim Steinman's canon.
It's really kind of a Peter Pan, Romeo and Juliet, all of this sort of rolled into one with some just really kick-ass music thrown in. Like just ridiculously kick-ass music. And the cast, this cast is packed full of ridiculous, insanely talented people. Because this show is hard. You can't just do one. You have to sing this music, which is very hard, and you must dance. This is probably some of the hardest choreography I've ever seen. It's very quirky and very different, and very much its own style for a reason. The way the Lost, that group, dances, it's very much their language. So just watching them learn it stressed me out. And I do like a few counts of 8 with them, and I had to work that quite a bit by myself on my own time, just because it's very different. And the look of the show too, it's kind of like this celebration of like punk rock
um, Iggy Pop, glam rock, and but it all comes down to just the rawness of falling in love and what happens to you when you fall in love and the risks you take, what happens when that person hurts you, how do you get back to them if you want to, decisions being made growing up, all those things, innocence. And, it's a really cool show. I was surprised at how much I really genuinely liked it in rehearsals. And now that we're open, I can see the audience a little bit, but there are certain sections I can see them a little bit more. But I can hear them singing along to the songs and crying and cheering. And, it's cool to see that I know how much that music meant to me and to you too, and to see other people, just going wild during Bat Out of Hell. It's like, this is really cool. And that's why we do what we do. We, as entertainers, we want to invoke an emotion. We want you to remember a time in your life or to see something you've never experienced. That's our job. And so to see people going through that every night is really, it's such a cool gift. Because that's, why we do what we do. It's really cool.
After the break, Anne shares the deep dive she took into Jim Steinman's catalog to prepare for her role in Bat Out of Hell. And we talk about the show's amazing cast and how she and a co-star are helping newbies to Vegas adjust to life in Sin City. That's next on Jeff Does Vegas. You mentioned the cast of this show, and you mentioned Travis Clower, who, Travis is a Vegas veteran in and of itself. He did, what was it, about 1 billion performances at Jersey Boys or something like that.
He's the longest run. He holds the record of playing Frankie Valli the longest. He's a beast. He's a beast. But we've always wanted to work together in a show. It just never happened. And then callbacks were really intense. It was like 2 weeks of callbacks. And as you go along, it's less and less people. And then the last day, they're pairing people up, to do this. And we sing Paradise by the Dashboard Light, which is, 8 minutes of just, blood going everywhere, bleeding, screaming, vocals, just crazy. And they had us sing it like over and over and over and over. And we had done it about 6 times in a row that day. And they asked, "Can you do it one more time?" And we're like, "Sure." And he looked at me and was like, "Oh my God." I was like, I think I got one left in me. He's like, "Yeah, me too." But Travis, I think with he and I, we just like each other in life. We have a lot of respect for each other, and we both are very focused, but we're also fearless. So we're willing to just go for it, and we have the other one's back. So I felt so incredibly safe working with him musically and with all, because we do a lot of physical stuff too. There's a lot of combat in the show, and Paradise, we're just jumping all over the place. It's wild. And you have to really take care of each other while singing this insane music. So it takes a lot of concentration and focus and being very precise. And he's just absolutely flawless and just the most generous actor I've ever worked with. It's just been, it's really easy. He makes difficult stuff very easy. And having that kind of trust with another actor is so rare and such a gift. And I know I'm privileged every day to work with him, and we have so much fun. And we're both, very chill and just kind of come into our show, go home. So it's a very nice, stress-free environment to work in with him. And we're also working with people of all different ages. Some people, this is like their first job ever, and other people have been working forever. So watching other actors in the show have that experience. Our gentleman who plays Strat, who's also named Travis, ironically, he's never done theater ever, like never stepped foot in a musical ever in his life. He's a rocker. He's done band work. He won second place in The Voice in Canada. He opened for Bon Jovi. This kid's just a rocker, period. And I would be so scared to come into something I didn't know anything about. And he was so brave. They're having him jumping all over the place, ripping his shirt off and like popping blood packs everywhere and doing all this crazy stuff. And he never faltered one. He was like, okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll do that. I'm like, this kid got some balls. And then Alize, who plays the other female lead, she's worked and stuff. She came into the theater a lot later, and she's done some like smaller roles, ensemble work, and she booked this part, and it is a beast. I mean, she is singing, and to be that young, and she's another one. She's so brave. I admire her tenacity, and she also has the humility to ask questions and want to be more, wanting to learn more, wanting to push her performance further, and to have that kind of want to learn and to be better at that age, when given something that could make anyone else kind of egotistical. It's not even a drop in her. She wants to learn. She wants to learn. She wants to grow. She wants to be. And watching her completely transform into this character, and the two of them get stronger and stronger and stronger every night. Travis and I sit back and watch them, and we're like, this is so cool. Watching these two people like explode.
Have you and Travis sort of taken on almost the mom and dad role with some of the rookies that have come on to sort of help guide them? Because I would imagine life in a Vegas show, maybe you've got some preconceived notions and of what your life is going to be like. Mm-hmm. Have you been sort of able to say, okay, guys, here's kind of what you should or shouldn't do, don't go out partying every night after the show in spite of wanting to do that kind of stuff?
I think it's been more like, for me, it's been like, hey, if you need a doctor or like to get your hair done or your nail, like here's call this person. If you need facial, call this person. Helping like that. And when people have asked questions, absolutely. For Travis and I, especially, we're very calm, and we're also very serious about what we do, happy and fun and everything, but we're very serious. And so, and I know, because I kind of looked to older people in the cast when I was doing stuff when I was super young, how they were, just because I was getting started. And, we try to keep it calm and sincere and hardworking. We both have no patience for shenanigans. So I think it's important to, set the tone so people know, like, this is work and this is what we do. And this is a good group. They are all different ages and from different places, and they come in every day and they work really hard. And they're all so ridiculously talented. They could all have their own show. I'll just pass by somebody on stage and I can hear them sing for just a brief moment, and it takes your breath away. So it's really cool to see them all kind of come together, because this is a very difficult show to cast. You have to, especially for the role of Strat, which Travis Cormier plays, you have to sing like Meatloaf. And Meatloaf was different because he could sing very, very high, but his voice never thinned out. He still had the weight, like a very masculine weight to his voice, singing in the rafters. That's very rare and very hard to find. And you have to look like you're 18, because we only say that 75 times in the show.
Right.
So, at one point I was asked, do I know anyone who can sing this material? And I was like, I do, but they're older. Like, I don't know anyone who looks that young. And so they took their time casting that role. They really looked. And I think only a small handful of people have played the role. And with Travis and I, we're the second people to play these roles full time. And that's a lot of pressure. The couple, well, they became a couple. The original Falco and Sloan fell in love in real life. They just had a baby and they're engaged. Very exciting. And they're like, huge West End, people. And it was intimidating because I've never had the privilege of playing a major role like that so early on in the game. And I respect Sharon so much, who plays Sloan. So I was very, very nervous. But when the director came in, he said, I said, do you want this to be funny? Do you want this to be serious? And he said, you know what? I don't want you to worry about it. He's like, let's just try it every way, and then I'll let you know. I was like, okay. So, that's terrifying. But at the same time, I was like, I just have to be brave and just jump in. And he very much guided us in in the story itself kept it open for us to take on our own interpretations and still stay true to the intention of the characters. So that was a really cool experience. But, you know, I was exhausted every day of rehearsal. It was like 9 to 5 every day for 2.5 weeks. And then we went into 10 out of 12 and then we opened. So it was like everything happened in 4 weeks.
Wow.
So I would come home from rehearsal and be like, like out, just because it was so much. Singing this music is athletic. Mm-hmm. It's a lot like how it was with Baz. You know, Baz was exhausting because you're using so much energy to sing. So this, you definitely get a workout in the show for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can definitely eat more ice cream in your life in the show because you're going to burn it off in 5 minutes. But yeah, it's a beast, but it's really cool.
You and Travis get to do Paradise by the Dashboard Light, which I mean is obviously the ultimate. I'd say that's probably the ultimate Meatloaf showstopper, Jim Steinman song of all time.
Absolutely.
But is there another song somewhere in the show that you wish you got to sing instead of someone else? Is there something that somebody sings that you're just super jealous of?
Well, if I were a boy, I would want to sing Bat Out of Hell just because that song is so freaking cool. Mm. And I just love it. But, you know, that's just not going to be, I'll have to do that on my own time. That would be like, you know, my living room performance. We're really lucky because that Paradise would be the one I would be regretful if I didn't get to sing it, because that is one of my all-time favorite songs. And that number is such a showstopper. It's so funny and so wild and so crazy. And I love performing it every night. I do love the arrangement for the song For Crying Out Loud that Strat and Raven sing is very beautiful. However, it's very hard. So I'm not that jealous. It's more like oh, wow, this is so much fun. And then when I hear them singing this like one particular section, I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. I'm just going to sit back here and listen and just enjoy this, that I don't have to stress out singing this thing every single night, because it is difficult. And Travis and I also do a song that was never released by Jim Steinman called What Part of My Body Hurts the Most. And the first time I heard it, I was like, I want to sing this song. And it's extremely difficult. And we get to sing it. And of course, all coming back to me now, I would be really sad if I didn't get to do that one, which is probably the most terrifying song ever. Because, you know, Celine Dion recorded it and everyone, you know, on TikTok was making the parody, you know, where they're like in their robes and like people are running around, and because it's so hard to sing.
Yeah.
And that was the song. I wasn't in town for the first audition. And so I had to send a video submission. And I was like, whatever, go big or go home. I'm going to record me doing this song in my bathroom. And I tried to sing through it once and I just like burst into tears because it's so hard. And I was like, I have to do this just for myself. I have to be able to sing this song and not be so scared of it. And so that song has a lot of meaning for me, just because it kind of got me over a little bit more of stage fright. Now, we're always terrified. Anyone who's like, I don't feel any, is lying. That's a lie. Every performer is scared to death. We just channel that into different areas. You know, if we're scared, we channel it into being very focused, or we channel it into like high energy, or we put it into dancing. Like, we're scared to death. And we're always getting over it and pushing ourselves to be braver. And it was kind of like getting pushed out of the bird's nest. Like, that song made me focus, be brave, believe in myself a little bit more, and work a little harder. And so I appreciate getting to sing. I only sing like a chunk, but that chunk is terrifying. And I love singing it. I would love to do the whole thing, but that's also not true because I'd probably pass out.
Jim Steinman has such a big catalog. I mean, he's known as the Meatloaf guy, but there's so much to his catalog. And you mentioned It's All Coming Back to Me Now, which is Celine Dion turned into a hit. Meatloaf recorded it as well, but was minor hit for him. And they sneak Making Love Out of Nothing at All, which was an Air Supply song that gets snuck into the show. Are there any other Steinman songs that you would love to have seen in this show?
I love Life is a Lemon.
Such a great song.
It's such a good, and the guitar riff in that is so sick. I love the guitar riff in that song. It's just a really great punk rock kind of feel. I love Life is a Lemon. And what was the other one? Bad for Good.
Oh, Bad for Good's a great song
Bad for
too.
Good,
Yeah.
which is like also 45 minutes long.
Yes.
But like, one thing we did have to cut for time is a monologue my character does. And in it, it's all Jim Steinman's prose and poetry because he wrote so much. And there's a little section in that I had to sing. And the director told me, oh, it's from one of his songs. I was like, oh, okay. So of course I like delve in trying to find what song it's from. And it's Bad for Good. And when I listened to all 9 minutes of it, I was like, this song is so cool. You could do a whole musical based on this one song. I think it was hard. When they started the show in 2017, the original version was 3.5 hours long.
Too long.
And I mean, left Les Mis in the dust. It was like that. But Jim would just not cut anything. He was so, eccentric and over the top. And that's his music. I can't even imagine. And so it was very difficult for him to make cuts. And then the current version on tour, I believe, is about a little over 2 hours. With intermission. And so when they came here, which I really respect, is they knew better than to do that here, just because our audiences are different. People like to do multitude of things, a night. They want to go see 2 shows, and so it's important that we stay in that, 90-minute, 85-minute chunk. And I know it was heartbreaking for them to have to cut certain things. And we ended up having to cut, 2 more from rehearsal. And that was difficult, especially for the people who were singing those songs. But at the same time, the music is so full of exposition and memories and emotions and all those things. The story is still there. It's gonna it was kind of like, okay, this is tough, but we still got it. Like it was a good lesson too of when something isn't there,
mm-hmm.
making sure that you're still, showing that part. So having to cut a few of the songs after we had rehearsed them was tough. But, everyone just was professional. And, that was part of our contract. They said, we have to be at 90 minutes. So just so you know, if we go over, we will have to cut a song or 2. And I was like, oh God, please do not cut what part of my body hurts the most, because that's kind of unknown. And thankfully they didn't. And it's, as an actor too, it's such a great moment because Travis and our characters, we had something happen before where something goes too far. And it's like, what happens in a relationship when that happens? How do you get back? And so that whole song is these 2 people saying like, I'm in so much pain, of what happened between us. My whole body aches. I just don't know which part of it is the most heartbroken. Mm-hmm. And everyone's gone through something like that. And so watching people in the audience, become emotional when they see it, or hold the person next to them, that couple hold hands a little tighter, is magical.
You mentioned listening to Bad for Good. I have a question. Was it the original Jim Steinman version of Bad for Good or the Meat Loaf version?
Jim Steinman.
Nice.
Yeah, I went old school.
You had to do some digging to find that, I bet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was like, the other thing too, once I heard Jim sing, I understood why Meat Loaf sang the way he sang.
Yeah.
Clearly, Jim was like, it's like this. And it's like that in our show too. Like there are certain stylistic things that are so hammered that makes the music even more difficult. Like you'll sing the same phrase, but every time you sing the phrase, the accent's on a different part. And this time it goes a little faster, this time it's a little slower. So your brain's like, ugh. But that's how Jim created music. Nothing is ever repeated. If you even listen to like his choruses, there's something slightly different every time you hear the chorus. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, how Prince would construct songs. Like he would open with a bridge, go into a verse, chorus it for a while, and then end it on a second verse. And you were like, what just happened? It's just like, their musical journey is so unique. Mm-hmm. And both of those gentlemen wrote with so much intention and purpose. So And when you're singing it, you're like, I see why he did that. He did this here because this is what's important about this phrase this time. And he did this here because he wants this to be emphasized this time. And then we're doing that physically on stage. So it's been a lesson. I really enjoyed listening to Jim's album when him singing the song. It had a little different meaning because he was always talking about falling in love and being in the sand and the cold, California breeze and wearing your Levi jeans. And it's so romantic and masculine. It's like masculine romance, which I think is a voice that's not heard a lot. Mm-hmm. And I love listening to, like that whole, like, I'm a dude, but like, I'm totally romantic and in love in a sexy, mannish way. I was like, ooh, yeah. That's just like it's a voice that you don't get to hear as often in music right now. So it's really cool to hear that, mm-hmm. that kind of a romance from that point of view.
My understanding with that Bad for Good album was that was supposed to be the second Bat Out of Hell album, but that was when Meat Loaf and Jim were kind of in one of their mm-hmm. off again portions of their on again, off again relationship, because there's a ton of music on the Bad for Good album that made it onto later Meat Loaf albums, including Bat Out of Hell 2. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through was on the Bad for Good album. And I think Lost Boys and Golden Girls.
Yep.
And even maybe Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire.
Frying Pan. Yeah. That's in that album too. Yeah. With Jim and Meat Loaf, they both were big personalities, very stubborn. And when it worked for them, it worked. And when it didn't work, it did not. So that was kind of like the magic between them, is that when they were on the same page, oh my God, it was just like, and that, was the most success for both of them. And then when they bumped heads, it was ugly mm-hmm. from all the things I've been told from people who've worked with both of them. Cause I did a lot of research. I interviewed a bunch of people who worked with both. And I think that's the hard part about some people, who are artistic. You got to be a little wacky. We're all crazy. It's just like, you have to be a little wacky, because if you think mainstream, you won't be able to see, imagine, your imagination with someone else's imagination. And so you got to be a little wackadoodle-doos to be able to do that. It's just like, what level of crazy are we at what point? And Jim was tough. I mean, I think he fired like over 9 directors of the musical originally. I think he went through even more than that. And for various reasons, like just bumping heads over. And our director who made it through, Jay Sheep, he is very patient and quiet, very cerebral. And working with him was like working with Stanley Kubrick. He's very, he blocks geometrically, but he had that kind of, I think, mind and energy that someone like Jim could work with, where Jim understood, or I should say Jay understood Jim's mind and why he was writing what he was writing, and was naturally very respectful of that creatively. He would tell stories here and there of like, one time Jim yelled at me, and we'd be like, oh my God. And he's like, well, give him some time, cool down. And then we worked it out. I'm like, oh my God, I would have been a puddle of tears, but he really knew how to work with him. Mm-hmm. And that was the hard thing about Meat Loaf and Jim, is that they both were just so passionate and so talented that it kind of bit him in the butt sometimes. But when they did come together, Jim understood that masculine romance, and Meat Loaf embodied it, because he was like an everyman, like he wasn't like the hottest dude to walk in the room, but he was so sexy because he was confident and he wasn't afraid to say he was in love. And that's like, speaking from the ladies, we love that. We love confidence. Like, you could look like, a goof, but like someone who's like genuinely confident and straightforward, that's really sexy. And like, that was what made, Meat Loaf and all of his sweat very sexy because he was a very sweaty man.
Yes, he
Travis,
was.
Travis got a gift when we opened, and it's like one of Meatloaf's like scarves, and it's signed, and there's like a stain on it, and it's Meatloaf's sweat. And we're, it's framed. We're all looking at it, and I was like, "Oh my God, you even got like his man juice on here. Like, this is so cool." And Travis was like, "Yeah, and it's kind of gross, but it's like really cool." I'm like, "Yeah." Like, that was just the funny thing about Meatloaf. He was really one of a kind. And Jim found his muse.
I had 2 items in my radio career bucket list. One of them was getting to meet and talk to Weird Al Yankovic, which I did.
Ah, that's so cool.
And the second one was getting to meet and talk to Meatloaf. I never got to meet him, but I did get to interview him and I did get to talk to him. And I know it was during the Hang Cool Teddy Bear album tour. And so that was again, one of the sort of off again times with Jim. But I know in talking to him about working with Jim Steinman versus working with other writers and asking him what that was like, his big thing was, it's not like working with Jim Steinman. There's nothing like working with Jim Steinman, and there never will be anything like working with Jim Steinman. And he said that was the big thing when he went in to work with these writers, is he told them, don't try to be Jim Steinman because nobody else ever will be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. There's certain, with great, talent and genius comes the flip side, just like everything for everybody. And so that's where, some people can be really hard to work with, or they're so passionate, or they have an idea. I mean, they wrote it. It's like their dream, their imagination, their creation. And so when someone manipulating that or changing it, some people are like, oh yeah, it's fine, let's just make it work. And Jim was like, absolutely not. Like, he was just very, very intense, but his music is so detailed. You can see, and I mean, he started writing Bat Out of Hell, he was 19, and he wanted that musical since he was 19 years old, and only finally came into fruition like right before the end of his life.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a long time to wait for your dream to happen. And and with Meatloaf too, his career has had so many ups and downs, and extreme ups and extreme downs. That's a lot for the human heart to take on. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the sad things about this business is that when it's great, and when it's not, it's awful. And it's how people handle it. And there's so much heartache. And God, it just hurts you so much. And a lot of people, fall victim to it, or it's just overwhelming. And I've watched that. Fortunately and unfortunately, I saw a lot of that really young, because I got started young, and I kind of saw the bad things that can happen in this business when I was a kid. I'm grateful that I saw it then, because it made me make decisions later to protect myself and stay, focused and healthy. But you got someone who's plucked out of nowhere, and they've got this gift, and all these things are coming at them. It's really hard to manage all of that. And the two of them, like I said, when they bumped heads, it was just the worst, because when they got along, they made some awesome stuff. I
am so stoked to get to Vegas and see this show. I can't wait to get down there and see you guys. Before I let you go, I have one very important question I have to ask. On a hot summer night, would you offer your throat to the wolf with the red roses?
Will he offer me his teeth?
Yes.
Will he offer me his jaws?
Yes.
Will he offer me his hunger?
Yes.
And does he love me?
Yes.
Yes.
So again, on a hot summer night, would you offer your throat to the wolf with the red roses?
Yes.
I bet you say that to all the podcasters.
Ah, you got me good. we do say that in the show. And I have to say, every time our cast member says that line, I bet you say that to all the boys. My friend Mecca and I are on the other side of the stage. She plays the Hara, and we always go, Daddy! Super loud, because we were saying that's like one of the sexiest things ever on that original album. And still the hottest thing ever.
Ann, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for taking time to jump on and chat. I can't wait to come see you guys in Vegas.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon.
You can catch Ann and the rest of the cast in Bat Out of Hell the Musical at the Paris Theater inside the Paris Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas 6 nights a week. For tickets and showtimes, visit batoutofhellvegas.com and follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at LV Bat Out of Hell. Also, if you want to keep up with what Ann herself is up to, give her a follow on Instagram at Ann Martinez LV. And of course, you can find all these links in the show notes at jeffdoesvegas.com. And that wraps up another episode of Jeff Does Vegas. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show, or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas. Or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been Jeff Does Vegas, a Walker New Media production.